Welcome to the August 9th, 2024 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to by emailing Club Cubase. Let me clear my throat. clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed, but we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. When asking questions, so if you don't see an immediate response to your question, we will go through them chronologically, and if you don't see an immediate response, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be helpful. We should, when asking a question, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, so if it's version 11, 12, or 13, if it is Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful, and which operating system. So if you're running on Windows or Mac OS, that information is also helpful. And we should have an index of all the topics posted. Tonight I actually have a gig, so we're gonna go for about 3 hours today, and then I have to go over for sound check for a performance I'm doing tonight with my friend. So the index may be very, very late tonight or early tomorrow morning, depending what time I get back from the performance. So just a heads up, there may be a delay but we will have an index of all the topics with timestamps that you can navigate to. When asking, if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, there's about 34,000 different topics that you could search for on, if you go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude, who serve as moderators. They're not Steinberg employees, they just really do this kind of out of the goodness of the community, so we'll give special thanks to them. Also, kudos should go to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So it's an unofficial Cubase Nation Discord site, which is a wonderful resource of compiled information, different links, and tutorial videos for the Steinberg community. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm going to be the host of the live stream today. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. So if you are on the live stream, please feel free, or if you're watching it afterwards, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. With that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, so the first question is from A.L. Will. It says, in Cubase Pro 13, how do I record Arpache 5 output to a MIDI track and an audio track? Okay, so let's say if I have like a bass sound here, and I want to open up the Arpache plugin. So I'm going to come over, and we'll just go to, say, this is an arpeggio MIDI plugin. So as we play this, so what we want to do is I'm holding down a chord. I'll open up the instrument so that we can see that I just hold down a chord, and it's going to arpeggiate. Now, when we typically will record this, since I'm just holding a chord down, so now that I've done that, if we look at the MIDI part, we can see that I just held a chord, but we don't see the result of the arpeggiator. So if we want to do that, what we would do, and this is slightly different on Cubase 12 and 13, is on 13 we can move this little line down. So when we move this line down, above the line is recorded data, and below the line isn't recorded. In earlier versions, you have like a little record enable icon. So at this point, if now when we want to record this, so now we've recorded the result of the arpeggiator in as MIDI data. Now if we wanted to capture that as audio at the same time, what we could do now is right click, we'll come over, let's add an audio track, and we could come over here in Cubase 13. We can just come right over here and we'll say, okay, I want Retrologue as my audio input. So I'm going to add that track. So I'm going to record the MIDI data on this track with the Arpache, and then I'm going to come over and record this information as the audio output, because we have the audio output of Retrologue configured as the audio input. So I'm going to record enable both tracks, and now so we can see that we have our MIDI data recorded here with the arpeggios, and if we listen to our audio, the audio that was being generated by the instrument, which was arpeggiating, is now captured as an audio track. So for the MIDI, make sure that when you load up that you move this particular line for which plugins that you want recorded. And for an audio track, we can now take the output of the instrument. If you're in Cubase 12 or earlier, you could route the instrument to a group, route that group to an audio input. But in Cubase 13, we could route directly to our audio track, like so. All right, so we have a question from Ryan Thomas. How do I move an audio event while preserving the position in relation to the grid? So if we want it, so there is a concept in Cubase where, you know, we could kind of preserve, like restrict the motion. So let's say if I'm moving this particular event, which is falling, let's say slightly before measure 9 here, and we'll say it's not necessarily on the grid, so we'll move it kind of in the middle. I'll hit my J key and we'll take our snap off, so we'll put it kind of not necessarily on the grid. So if I wanted to move this particular event, what we could do and preserve, so it really matters on which direction that you initially start moving an event. So if I move an event vertically and then hold down the control key or command key, depending on your operating system, that will kind of preserve the position. So if I move this event and I haven't let go of the mouse and now I hit the command or control key, now that event will be preserved in its actual time because I moved it vertically. I moved it vertically first. So now hitting control or command will kind of constrain the movement in time. If I had a number of tracks here, so I'll just add some more tracks, and let's say I move it over here and I accidentally moved it. Now if I move it to a different track because I moved it horizontally first, that when I hit the control or command key, it will preserve it on that track. And as I hold down the control or command key, I can't move it to a different track. It's going to be preserved on that track. So just holding down the control or command key will restrain me from shifting this event in time. So even if I wanted to make a copy of the event, I would hold down the Alt or Option key, and while still pressing that down, hold down the control or command key. And now once we do that, we can make a copy and have it constrained in the direction so that we can preserve the timing or the track that it's on. So try moving the event, and before you let go of the left mouse button, just simply hold down the Control or Command key, and that will restrict the movement. But again, if I move it vertically, holding down the Control key will not allow me to move it in time. If I move it horizontally, I can't move it and place it into a different track. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on. Thanks for joining us. And we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset in the UK. We see Alexander Plasko checking in from Connecticut in the eastern part of the United States. We have Tim Kay checking in from Zeist in the Netherlands. And his cat Buddy waves a paw saying hello. It's the international cat hello sign. All right, so we see Val checking in from Vienna. We see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. So we see from Val says, any update on the trivia prizes? So the person that's handling it is on vacation. I think they are back next week. So hopefully next week we should have everything kind of sorted out. Sorry about the delay with that. Okay, so we see, please can you show us how to sidechain reverb in our group channel? So it says Cubase sidechain, reverb sidechain, please. All right, so let's take a look. Here, I'll just open a different project. We have some files that would make sense. Okay, so let's say if we have something like vocal here. All right, and let's go ahead and add a reverb to this. Okay. I'll just take off the... Okay, so now let's say if I wanted to take a different source, or we could even probably duplicate this track. All right, so on my, let's say my Revelation, so we have this particular channel. So we have our reverb on this channel. Okay, so now what we could do is we're going to go to the Revelation channel, and on our effects channel, and so I usually get this backwards, but let's put a gate. And we can take, I'm just going to take like a duplicated channel here, and we're going to activate the side chain. So we're going to set it up, and we'll say to our duplicated vocal, okay, and I'm going to just route this duplicated track. Alright, and let me just put that, and let's activate the sidechain. and like as I thought I would do, I probably got it backwards. So let's make the gate first. Just don't want that on there. So Alright, and let me just see if I have the order. Let me experiment with the order here. But basically, you could just take a noise gate or a compressor and sidechain that compressor before the gate opens. So even if I wanted to just take, let's just listen to. See if I do like this as my source. So what you do basically on the effects channel is just come over and you could put a gate or a compressor, and then that you could trigger that, and that would open up the sidechain based on the sidechain input source. All right. All right, wonderful to see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. We have Uno Memento from Finland. We have Giddy Beats checking in from Nigeria. Thanks for joining us. Tim Weinheimer from California. And we have Michael Graybills checking in from Dallas as well. We have Move 1904 joining us from Germany, and Sasha joining from Hungary. Razel from Denmark. All right, Michael Graybill asks, with a deactivated template in 2 mixer windows, mix 1 shows subgroups, mix 2 shows main groups. Activating an instrument track, it shows up on both mixers. Any way to keep them as they are? So I think that, you know, if we have a template that's set up, so let's say if we have a project that's configured, so let's say we have 16 tracks of audio, and at this point we have our mixer set up to, we'll go to our visibility and say we don't want to see channels 1 through 8. And then we could add this as a configuration. So we'll say configuration 1, and we want to do kind of the opposite for configuration 2. So now if we kind of just switch back and forth, we could do this. So the problem gets to be, and kind of a design, you know, dilemma could be, now that I add a virtual instrument track, like in my template. So let's say we add a Groove Agent track. Then now when we go to the mixer, the Groove Agent track, just so it's not orphaned, will be visible in both configurations. So a lot of times we want, you know, make the configurations after all of the different instruments are available. And we had it in previous versions where it wouldn't automatically show up, and then people complained that when they add a new instrument that they couldn't find it in the mixer. So this way it's always available, and you could just come over here and deactivate, or deactivate the visibility of that and update the configuration, so that as we come over here we can just say, and now as we do this, but this way, as different elements are added, they're not automatically filtered from the mixer visibility. So I think that's kind of the design intention behind that. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, how to send pan always follow main pan, even how to, I guess, maybe the send pans to always follow main pan, even if main pan is automated. Okay, so let's say if we have a particular channel here, we could go into the channel settings, and we can see from this little drop-down menu that there is a link panners. So if we go to, let's add an effects channel. And now we come over to the panning, that as we adjust our panning on a track, that the effects will automatically pan right along. We could also just uncheck that, and as we do panning here, this panning is independent of it. And so even if main pan is automated, so if I just wanted to come and let's automate, we have this set to link the panners, and I automate the panner here. Everything that we just did will be completely automated, just like that. So if we rewind a little bit, so that's how we can just link those two particular ones. So if you just come right here, and I think if you kind of leave that checked by default, it will, yeah, and just kind of a follow-up point says I don't want to write automation for each send manually. So yeah, just check that. And then if we have multiple, so let's come over here to our destination. Let's say if we do it with a new effect. That what we could do now is we'll just add a new effects channel. Sorry, my monitoring computer is kind of just turning on and off. So if we add two effects at this point, and the link panners option is checked, and we go to the panning, that we can pan all 8 effect sends with the normal panner as you need it. All right, wonderful to see Jan from CubaseIndex.com. All right, so we see Balcazar from Mexico says, how can I record a MIDI CC part with a controller and then overdub it with the controller again to adjust a certain part? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say if we have a, all right, so I'm gonna just if I record and we have it like this is what our modulation wheel is doing. At this point, let's go ahead and record. Okay, so we recorded MIDI and automation, and we want to overdub our modulation data that was written in. All right, so we're going to activate MIDI record within the editor, and if we go to preferences, let's come over here to, there's a little preference. Let's say if we go to record MIDI, you'll say replace recording in editors. So here we could just choose controller. So go to your preferences, to MIDI, and choose replace recording in editors and choose controllers there. So now as we go and do recording, I can punch in. And we could just simply have the new, and we could also, let me just make sure if we set this into for replace. So now I'm going to just come over here. Then I could just record those new changes right there. So if you go to the MIDI, linear and cycled record, put it into replace, and also just come to this particular preference under record MIDI and then replace recording in editors and choose controller. And as you do this, as most people are doing this, they're, try just to record directly into, while the MIDI editor is open, which I think most people are doing. Okay, so we have, all right, so it's Tohican from Vietnam, who's asking a question about the panning. Thanks for joining us from Vietnam. Okay, so we see Yash Decide just says, hey Greg, were you able to go through the email that I sent you yesterday? So yeah, one of the things, and this question was about how to work with different panning, or to work with how to get like samples that you've created in Groove Agent, if they should automatically be incorporated within the project window. So let me just start off here. Let's jump to this particular project. All right, so if we are building a project and we want to be able to archive the project, we have to take into consideration different media. So if we are, we could record audio into different folders in Cubase, and save the project, and we could hand the project off to someone. But a lot of times when we're doing audio recording, we want to make sure that as we do a new project, that our new project is set up so that when we go to, let's say, create empty, that we define our audio project, that everything is in there. So if we're building Groove Agent custom presets, the question was, how come the Groove Agent kits aren't saved within the project? Because a lot of times when we're doing this, if we are taking an instance of Groove Agent, and we take the instance of Groove Agent and we start dropping samples in. So let me just come here and drop some samples in that we could. So Groove Agent is going to use kind of the actual origin of the particular samples as its location, because you probably, if you're making a Groove Agent kit, there's a good chance that everything that you're doing, you may want to use that kit in other projects. So if you want to use the kit in other projects, which is pretty common, it makes sense not to tie the Groove Agent samples and place it into a folder that could be moved, but you want it to be with wherever your particular samples are going to be, for Groove Agent, so that, if you wanted to open it up and you archived a project, that we don't have to worry about where the audio files were. So I'm going to come over and just let's see if I have some drum one-shots. Okay. Okay, so let's say I have a number of snare hits here. Okay, and what I want to do is to take those snare hits and we're going to drag them to Groove Agent. So we have kind of our own kit. Let me just drag these over so we can have it. So let's say we've made our own samples. So if we want that particular kit to automatically have the samples included within the project folder, what you could do is just simply drag those into the project and build the kit from there. That way the samples are always going to be in the project folder. But if you just kind of drag the files not into the project, because we've chosen not to drag them into the project but directly into Groove Agent, the original sample location is what's preserved. So if I wanted to open that up again, I don't have to have that project present to open up the Groove Agent kit. But if I chose not to copy the samples into the project, what we could do now is just come over here and we could choose to export the kit with samples. So at this point we could just say I want to save my kit, and we will come over here and say, okay, let's go to Documents. I want to go to Projects, and I think we'll have this folder under Hangouts. And let's go to August 9th. I had all right, so let's say we want to store it into this particular folder, and we could also come over here and make a new folder, and we'll call this Groove Agent Samples. So we hit OK. We want to export the files, so we'll just come over here. We could give it a name. We'll say August 9th. So, and at this point we'll hit OK. And at that point, that particular kit is now, with its samples, is going to be stored within the project. So just because you made your own kind of samples for a project, if you didn't drag it into the files themselves, Groove Agent functions independently, so all of the files will be actually, called from their particular location. So it's just simple kind of file management, but realize that, often people, when they make a custom kit, will want to use that custom kit in other projects as well. So that's why it's kind of not stored at the project level initially. So all the samples, if you drag them into the project first and then build the kit from there, they're automatically going to be stored. If you chose not to do that and just to use the original source locations of the samples, then just simply right click and store the files directly within the project folder for you. So just kind of sample management, and realize that, while just because you used it in a project, that the actual files, if you didn't copy them into the project folder, won't necessarily be preserved within the particular project. Okay. All right, so we see Diamond District Studios checking in from Cape Town, South Africa. Great to see Jan from Cubase Index on. All right, so we see from Toican, says thank you. And how can copy the automation plugin send pregame panner from another track without recreating line for each automation? So, if you're going to copy the data, you would need to, so if we come here, let's say we have automation on Ascend. So we'll open up this channel. So let's let me just add a quick so if I'm kind of here and I'm automating a particular channel, so let's grab this and automate. So if we open that up, we could see, the automation. So we could say, okay, there's our level. So if we, want to copy, that automation, we could just copy, but you would need to, because if we come over here, if we open up, let's say, okay, we have, we go to audio 07 and we open up the automation lane. So let's say we are here, that we could paste that copied automation. But you would, you want to make sure, because you could automate thousands of parameters, that it's going to the same particular parameter. So one quick way of doing this often is to, if we have a particular channel, so let's say we want to automate our effects, and I come right here, that you could right click on it and just say show level automation track, and then you can just simply paste. So if we have automation on this track, I could say, okay, we're going to take this and I copy this automation. I go to this particular track, and let's say we have at this point I could right click on the parameter and we'll say, show the level automation, and then we could just simply come right here, we could reveal that and then paste. But because you don't want like a pan automation for your effects and to go for panning for the audio track or for your levels or an EQ, you would need to specify which exact parameters that you're pasting the automation into. All right. All right, so you see a question. Hey, Greg, do you have a solution for the red sign problem within HALion Sonic after testing HALion 7 license in Cubase Pro 13. All right, so generally if you're getting the red signs, and this will show up kind of next to, let's say, the instrument presets. So if we come to a particular library, and let's say, I'll show one with more. So let's say if we come here and we see a red sign, that's just indicating that you don't have a license for that particular content. So if we come over to your Steinberg library manager, you could, whatever content libraries that you don't have licenses for, that you could come over here and then just choose to remove those particular licenses. So again, that's just indicating which particular content is licensed and which isn't. So if we come over here, if you notice, you go to Bbox and none of these are licensed, then go to the Steinberg Library Manager utility, and you can say, okay, Bbox, I don't have a license for that. That was, installed as a trial version. Then I could just simply choose to remove those particular libraries. All right, so we have Tone Vision Ton Studio just saying hi, so thanks for joining us. All right, and their question is, hi Greg, could you please explain how you can control multiple parameters from plugins with just one MIDI fader? Haven't found anything suitable so far. It's really kind of currently set up as kind of just more of a one-to-one relationship as we do this, because it could be very kind of problematic. And we used to have this in kind of the old days with mixer maps, where we could have a MIDI controller control, multiple parameters at once, and then people would have multiple parameters, and they would go to adjust one parameter, and then 4 other parameters were adjusted inadvertently. So when we're doing with the MIDI remote control and with other devices like the generic remote or with the Mackie remote, it's generally going to be kind of a one-to-one relationship, just to make it simpler, so that we're not I've gotten hundreds of tech support questions when people had inexplicably written automation to a parameter that they didn't expect to. So that's why the current design implementation is for kind of like a one knob to be one parameter and using quick controls. So if we go to a particular track, that we could use quick controls and and have these 8 knobs quickly navigate between multiple parameters. But there isn't currently, and I know that the development team is aware of the desire to have one control that can control multiple parameters. So they're looking at ways to kind of make it where it's not confusing, and where users don't when they're not in multi-parameter mode and want to adjust one parameter, that they could do it and still have flexibility of doing it. So currently we could think of it as kind of more of a one-to-one relationship. So all right. All right, so we see from Yash, it says, I usually take a project backup after I'm done with the song. If I want to share the project with a collaborator who also uses Groove Agent, the sample should be saved with the project backup folder. So, it's because, again, the samples aren't in the project. The samples are in Groove Agent, which is being used in the project. So if you want to do that, if you wanted to back up all the samples instead of dragging the files to Groove Agent, if you don't want to do the export kit, if you don't want to do the export kit, drag it to a an audio track, all the samples, and then drag it into Groove Agent and build the kit from there. And then that will be saved within the backup project. All right, so we have a question from Robert Daisy Webb. Hi, Greg. Why don't I hear any audio playback when in direct offline processing? Example, working in EQ. All right, so let's take a... All right, so say we go to our direct offline processing. All right. So we can make sure, so let's say if we wanted to open up an EQ here, so just go to a plugin, we'll go to the Studio EQ. We'll set it to default here quickly. All right, so let's say as we preview here. Now you may have to use this in conjunction with the control room. So let's go to my audio connections and we'll see if this is routed. There's a good chance it's routed through the control room. So let's say if I go to my outputs here, and I will just put this in preview. So as we don't hear it, so we need to go through the control room. So to do that, we would just go to your audio connections. We want to set the outputs to not connected. And we'll activate control room. You could activate a monitor. And then we could use this for the preview. So now as we do this, so as we preview stuff, that sometimes when stuff is being previewed, it's not assigned to a particular output at that point. So that now as we preview, we can hear the changes. So try to go to your audio connections and outputs. We set this, we have our stereo out, we set it to not connected. Go to your control room, activate a monitor, and then use the outputs where it's going to your monitors, and then you should be able to hear the control room output. All right, so we have a question from Irfan Yasin. Hi, is there a way to ensure a singer is singing in tune or to scale? So VariAudio is really good at this. Having a great singer is always a really good option as well. But if you ran into a situation where, the singer was out of key in a particular project and out of tune, one of the things in VariAudio is going to be a component of Cubase Artist, Cubase Pro, and Nuendo. So when we go to a particular vocal, we'll go to our VariAudio. So we'll do this in our sampler. So we'll go to our VariAudio tab. All right, and then at this point we could kind of, like, if we know what the key is, and we could actually have Cubase kind of tell us what the key is. So in this case we're in C major. So we'll come over here and we could set our key to C major. So, and we could take an audio or a MIDI part, drag it to a chord track, and that could tell you the key. And at this point, we could choose to show our scale note guidelines. So as we would move particular notes, we could have that. We could also snap pitch editing, but we could just come over here, and there's even a scale suggestion within VariAudio, but we could just say, let's quantize the pitches to the key. And then at that point, this is probably pretty in tune. We could just simply quantize the pitches to a particular key here. And you could see, let me see if I could pull up a file that's maybe not as in tune. Let me see if I have in my, yeah. Here, I'll just open up a different instance of it. Okay.
Do you recall the day we first met?
All right. So I could just take, we see the chord track. I'm going to take the guitar part and drag it to the chord track. This will tell us that we're in the key of A major. I'll go to my vocal, and we'll come over here to VariAudio. We're going to say that we are in A major and quantize the pitches. So you could just use the quantize pitch function and have Cubase tell you exactly what the key of the song is, and just quantize the vocal directly within VariAudio. All right, let's get to the next question. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. Hope you're doing well, buddy. And just one quick programming note, I have a commitment on Tuesday, so we won't be having our live stream on Tuesday, but we'll resume back on Friday. So, all right, and we have George checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we see Lawrence from Barn Door Recording. So I was just thinking of you. I saw that there's the Newport Jazz Festival. I know you've been involved with that in the past. So, all right, and we have Brewmatic Entertainment just saying great info. Greetings from Houston, Texas. Yeah, my brother lives there. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see just a comment from Yash, says it'd be ideal if these Groove Agent files are stored in a project folder, as recalling the samples can be an issue if I move the source folder to another location. So, you know, if you want the Groove Agent samples in the project, just simply copy them to an audio track. You can have the audio track not bust anywhere, but again, as Groove Agent works as a plugin, that could be, you know, that same plugin could be run in multiple programs. You know, it's and different, you know, and if you're using it within different host programs, you know, the project having the samples stored within a project, you know, I think you can see where that could be problematic if you can't open samples because it's in a project file. But, you know, with the sampler track, it does it, as you mentioned, but the sampler track isn't a standalone instrument as well, so it's just a part of the program. All right, we see Nick on joining us from a sweltering Essex in the UK. All right, and we have Rolf Schild sending greetings from Germany. All right. Okay, so let me jump to a couple questions. I know we had Bear with me just for a second. We had a bunch of questions kind of mailed in. I'll jump to some of those. Okay, so one of the questions was, it says, "Hi Greg, I've been using Cubase 13 Pro on a PC with Windows 10 and before that Cubase 7.5. When opening up Cubase 13 Pro and recording, the project records in 7.5 even though I open up Cubase 13. I deleted 7.5 because I wanted to save access to a few things that aren't accessible in 13. If I delete 7.5, will I be able to open up 7.5 projects in 13, but without that parts won't work, but without the parts that won't work anymore in 13? Or is there some way to preserve both and record 13 and 13? So you can keep both programs open. Like I currently have, Cubase 12 and Cubase 13, but you could have previous versions. What I think you're running into is probably maybe a file association type of thing. So let's say I'll jump over here. Let's go to our documents and let me go to my projects folder. So like here, when we see this, we have like a .cpr file, and within the operating system, we could choose to have that .cpr file as a default extension that opens up particular programs. So if I right click here, I could choose to open this with, Cubase 11, 12, 13, Nuendo 12, etc., or Nuendo 13. So what I would do is probably, if you wanted to take, my guess is that if you double click on the project file itself, that it's probably defaultly set, the .cpr file is probably defaultly set to Cubase 7.5 as opposed to Cubase 13. So, and this is kind of at the operating system level if you're running Mac or PC, but you could kind of set the default application that opens up the files. Conversely, if you just open up Cubase 13, and instead of, if you're double clicking on the project file to launch the program, is just open up Cubase 13 and just simply open up the particular file that you want, and then all of those particular, then that it's going to be opened in Cubase 13 and not Cubase 7.5. So again, just make sure that when you go to a project that you could probably right click and set the file association to open up in the program, and then you could keep Cubase 7.5 installed and have that function completely independently of Cubase 13. But I think that maybe you're just double clicking on the project file and then it's launching the wrong program by the file association. So give that a shot. All right, let me see if we jump back to questions. All right. All right, so we see it's 25 degrees Celsius in Finland today. So all right, so we see Rolf just says many VSTs have MIDI learn function. That could be an easy fix. That's true. All right. All right, so we see from Ariana Ati says, I've been using Cubase 13, so I think we just covered this from what you had emailed in. Let me know if that makes sense for you, Ariana. And thanks for joining the live stream today. All right, great to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. Thanks for being online with us today. Uno Memento says, if you think you can get some wisdom here for Cubase, press the like button. All right, so we see from Irfan Yasin says, thanks for the demo. Unfortunately, the type of singing we do here, we do not use any music, is purely vocals. Our singers are always a few notes higher by the end of the song. Yeah, so if it's an a cappella thing that's kind of drifting, you know, you might just have to, like as you're working with this, you might have to kind of manually adjust it. If you have you know, so I'm not sure if you have like the chords or if you have a MIDI accompaniment, you could use that. But if everything is kind of slightly drifting sharp, you know, as it goes on, you know, like where these are, you know, like as you kind of look at it, it's just kind of stuff that tends to go sharp. Then, you know, if they're not kind of singing to or working with a reference pitch, you might have to kind of manually do it, because you could still, you know, if you know what the original key of the song is, you could set kind of the key here and then quantize the pitches accordingly. But some of it still may be kind of drifting sharp, and it may quantize to pitches within the scale, but not necessarily the correct pitches. So if they kind of drift up a major second, that could still be within like a diatonic Western scale and still be within the scale, but it may not be what the relative pitch is. So you may have to kind of go and do that manually. So, but sometimes what's really interesting, you know, is when you show, I've found that when I've worked with singers that had some issues with pitch, when they could visualize their pitch graphically, and they go, oh, okay, I could see that I'm going sharp, and as I go on, it keeps going sharp and sharp and sharp, or flat and flat and flat. That sometimes if they have a visual reference that you show them, that they could, you know, have a different level of understanding and sometimes can correct themselves. But if you have no kind of backing track, you might have to kind of just do it manually. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studio says, hi Greg, it seems here that sometimes I could output a MIDI track to most any instrument or input MIDI track from almost any instrument. Why is it that sometimes MIDI out instrument in doesn't show in tracks consistently? So it's really like a matter of if your particular instrument itself supports a MIDI output. So not all instruments have MIDI outputs. Most VST instruments don't have a MIDI output. So let's just come here. We'll show an instance. So let's say I have a Groove Agent loaded up here and we're playing. So since Groove Agent has its own kind of sequencer inside of it, so we could play patterns, that when I go to a track, I could set the MIDI input here from Groove Agent itself. So now if I wanted to record Groove Agent, the plugin itself is generating MIDI data, and the MIDI data is now being, so if I want to do a fill, and let's say I want this to do like a halftime. So now everything that, you know, we can do can be recorded directly in, because the instrument plugin itself has an output. But if I wanted to come over here to Groove Agent, since Groove Agent isn't necessarily generating patterns that we won't see, so we have Retrologue here, I'm sorry. So, but when we go to a MIDI track, I won't see Retrologue probably as a MIDI input port, but we could see like the chord pads. So, you know, most instruments won't have a MIDI output. A lot of, you know, like a lot of drum instruments do, some drum instruments do, Some will just allow you to kind of drag MIDI files into a project, but I would say by default, the vast majority of virtual instruments won't have a MIDI output. It's kind of a unique thing for those plugins that do have output. So yeah, see if you get the output from Groove Agent, but probably not other instruments. And it's just a design decision by the instrument developer. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer Sr. checking in from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from Ariana Addy, he says, thank you, Greg, to clarify recording in 13. This is for a newly created file from within 13. It saves in 7.5 originally. Thanks. So let me know, like, if it's, you know, when you say it saves in 7.5, is it saving as a, when you save the project, is it the project file, the .cpr file? So like when we come here and we do save, you know, so let's say if we did a new project, I'll come over here and I'm going to choose a folder. So let's say we'll call this Ariana. Okay, so I define my folder. And if I record an audio track, so I'm going to add an audio track and record. So record this. Okay, so we have, and let's save this project. So I'm going to now come over here, hit save. We'll call it Ariana. Okay, so we did this all in 13. Now when so, you know, let me know how it's, when you say it saves in 7.5 originally. But now when let's say I close this project, and let's find the files here. So I can go to my documents folder, just we'll go to projects and we'll see it in our Hangouts folder. See if I just saved it in here. Okay, so, and then we go to, this is where my Ariana folder is. This is our project folder. We can see that we have the .cpr file that we saved. Our audio file is recorded right in there. And if I go to just double click this, since we're in Cubase, or now you see it's actually doing, it's going to the default of Nuendo 13. But if we just come over here and say, let's open it in Cubase 13, that we can now activate the project. So we'll see just that one little file that we recorded. And that's kind of automatically taken care of for us. So let me know, Ariana, how it's, when you say it's, when it saves in 7.5, if it's saving into a 7.5 folder, or if it is, you know, if you know what you mean by it saves in 7.5 originally. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan on from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, he says he's late but present, and the like button is pressed, and all telemetry is normal. I was worried about the telemetry, so thanks for confirming that. Okay. All right, and wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, so George asks, please, Greg, what is the easiest way to route MIDI from an instrument track to other instrument tracks so that various instrument tracks play the same thing? Shall I copy the event? So one way of kind of doing this, and instrument tracks can vary from this than in a MIDI track. So let's say if I have, we'll load up an instrument track here. Okay, so let's say we want to find move one controller here quickly. All right, now if we have other instrument tracks, so let's say I wanted to take this data here and all right, and let's say we want to copy this to other instrument tracks. Let's say we'll do Retrologue, Pad Shop. And I'll load up a Retrologue sound here. Okay, so if we have a MIDI track, so not an instrument track, but a MIDI track, what we could do is use what we call sends. Now, when we work with instrument tracks, these are kind of fixed. Now, you could, very easily just take this event and, hold down the Alt and Control key and duplicate it and have another method would be if we take this data to a MIDI track, and on our MIDI track, we will go to what we call MIDI sends. So I could take this one MIDI track and I'm going to say, let's send it to, not our MIDI inserts, but our sends. And I'm going to just say we want this to go to HALion Sonic. We want it to go to Retrologue, and we can do up to 4 destinations. So now this one track can play so this one track could have multiple destinations. Now, what else is kind of interesting is we could say, okay, what the sends were originally kind of intended for also is to say, okay, when we go to Retrologue, I want Retrologue to do an arpeggio. So I could have Retrologue do an arpeggio while the other two just play the pad. So if now you could just come over here. So if you wanted one single track, we can so this way, if you want one single track, you could add a MIDI track and then use up to 4 sends to go to a single destination, to go to multiple destinations, or just copy the tracks. Sometimes I like copying the tracks because if I do something like that, I can say, okay, I want all of these notes to be up an octave or down an octave, or be able to edit velocity independently depending on voices, but either way will get you kind of where you want to go. So, but if you want it one single source that was going to be layered to multiple destinations, use a MIDI track, and then you could send it to 4 different destinations. You could duplicate that MIDI track, send it to an additional 4 destinations, etc. So if you needed to build like a really thick layer, and if you're doing it all within kind of one instrument, we could very easily do that within an instrument like HALion or HALion Sonic, where you could, you know, as we go to load in different projects, that we could, you know, just go to our MIDI, and then we could route all these to the same MIDI channel and set different we could do different transpositions as well as different ranges and velocity ranges for layers. But if you want to send it to multiple destinations from one source, use a MIDI track and use the MIDI sends. MIDI sends aren't available on instrument tracks, just be aware of that. Or, you know, copying it is also, you know, very simple and easy to do as well, and very straightforward. Okay. All right. Let me clear my throat. All right, so we see Lawrence asks, Greg, I've moved all my licenses to Steinberg licensing recently. I looked at eLicenser and I did not see anything listed, but used to see product X move to Steinberg licensing. Is it safe to remove the eLicenser? So some of the licenses will automatically migrate. Some will be updated to maintain the previous version. So if you went from, you know, Cubase 11 to 12 or 13, at that point you would see the Cubase 11 license still remain on. But I think you're fine removing the eLicenser. You could just try it, and if something doesn't work, just connect it back, and then you could check to see what that is, and also make sure that you had the latest eLicenser software that's updated as well. David M. says, hi everyone, my wife is convinced the streams are 4 times a week. Haha. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see discussion of a capo that was discussed in the last Zoom social meetup. All right, so we see from Mike Air 13 Pro, what's up, Greg? Happy Friday. How would I go about making something sit in a mix using the compression? All right, so let's see if we can find an example here. So maybe. All right, so let's listen to maybe this example here. So let's say,
oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long.
So let's say I want to take the bass here.
And our first kiss, there was no regret.
So I'm going to come over here and we'll just get to, so let's say we have no compressor on it, so
right after that Garth Brooks show, you told your daddy and he called my mom, said you were.
All right, so I'm gonna take the bass here and
Words are now dead and done. That was a long, long.
So I'm going to take the bass part and let's put a little compression on it.
Now our two grown daughters are married with kids of their own. And I know your dad's pretty happy now, 'cause what began as our first kiss.
So now we can hear how the vocal, the bass is kind of sustaining.
Do you remember?
And if I take this off, you hear how the bass will kind of get in the way of the vocal a bit.
Long time ago.
Kind of be a little
I still
woofy.
love you like the day that we met. Oh, a long, long. Do you recall?
So we'll start without.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on.
So the bass doesn't kind of get louder, kind of at the end of long notes. This is kind of just taming the swells.
Caught my breath while you called me too.
So now we'll just.
Well.
So where it was kind of could swell at times. So listen to that in context.
No regret right after that Garth Brooks show.
So the bass is a little not very fitting in as well.
My mom said you were too damn good for any boy that dumb. His soured words are now dead and done. That was a long, long time ago. Now our two grown daughters are married.
And let's say if I want to take just the guitars, and let's do a little. So we take this out. So where get kind of some louder notes, to kind of some of the notes kind of pop out versus other ones. So you have kind of a little more inconsistent dynamics. So that'll give you kind of idea how you can make stuff fit into the mix and sit in the mix a little bit better. Using kind of the standard dynamics plugins and processing that comes with Cubase. All right, so we have from inactive user, hi Greg, how can I create a bus for pre-selected tracks so they will all instantly be routed to the bus after creating the bus? All right, so there's a couple of ways of doing this. So okay, I'm just going to reread it, make sure I'm not going down the wrong path. All right. Okay, how can I create a bus for pre-selected tracks so they all instantly be routed to the bus after creating a bus? All right, so a quick way, let's say I want to take all of the drums, which are all the blue tracks here. So what I want to do now is select, I'm just going to select the top track, hold down the shift key and select the bottom track. So we selected all the drum tracks. And now what I want to do is right click and we'll see add track and we'll say group channel to selected channels. So we'll call this my drums bus. Now all the tracks are routed to my drum group. So if I wanted to apply EQ, and let's come over and say, okay, let's apply like an envelope shaper in the group. or let's do a little compression. So we can, so again, just select your different tracks. Here, right click, add track, add a group channel to the selected channels, and then the routing for that is automatically done to your new group. So that's I find a fast, easy way of being able to assign everything, and then you don't have to individually route each particular track to the newly created group. All right, so we see from clarification from Ariana Atti, it says it saves into a 13 folder, but the icon is red, 7.5, not the blue Cubase 13. So again, it's going to be, just come over to your file associations. I'm not sure if you're running Mac or PC, but, as soon as we go to this, right click and then just change the default file icon. So the .cpr, if I had this go to a Cubase 8.5, we can see that it's red by default. But if I switch this to go to Cubase 13, that at that point it would, so it's just, it seems like it's the file extension is associated, the .cpr extension is associated with Cubase 7.5 and not 13. I think if you fix that, then it would change the icon to the 13 bluish icon for you, Ariana. Okay, so we see from David M. Can you please go over time stretching in Wavelab? It's so different than Cubase. The time stretch window is grayed out. If it wasn't, I would not know what to do. Thanks. All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's... All right, so let's come over here. So we have an audio file and we want, let's say this is roughly 4-ish, like 3 minutes, 50 seconds-ish long. Okay, so let's come over to time stretching. Okay, so let's see if we... So now if we undo that function, so let's say so I just went to the process to time stretching. So let's listen to kind of the tempo here. Let's say I want to do time stretching. So we could say, whether we want it to be a target tempo, target duration. So let's say the duration of this is 4 minutes and 5 seconds. I want it to be 3 minutes and 55 seconds. So we just come here. Let's say 3:35. So now I hit apply. It's going to process and it should play faster. So if we undo that, so here we could choose kind of what factor we want to do our time stretching, whether it's time, BPM. So if you say, okay, I want it to be 100 BPM is the original source. I want to play 120 or 108 or 90, or we want to set the actual stretch factor, like a percentage. So again, if we're just kind of playing along and we say I want 4 minutes 5 seconds to be 3:35, I hit apply and it does the time stretching. If we want to do that again, that same factor. So let me know if that is helpful for you, David, or if you have any more questions on it. Okay. Okay, so we see Val just saying, I'm still trying to figure out how to program a instrument for HALion Sonic 7. Any tips are very welcome. So are you trying to create an instrument, or if you're programming an instrument? So let's say if I open up a HALion Sonic. So let's say I have this pad sound. So I'm not sure if you're trying to actually make, you know, so let's say if I come over here, let's just, you know, if you're trying to create an instrument with all the graphics and knobs, you know, HALion would allow you to do that, and it's kind of an authoring tool. Or if you want to, you know, so maybe I'm just being, you know, sorry if I'm not understanding. If you want to just kind of modify an instrument, or if you wanted to actually kind of create an instrument, but HALion has a whole set of tools for creating an instrument with all the graphics and knobs and different displays and metering and wavetable synthesis and granular functions that can be then saved as a VST instrument that could be loaded in HALion or HALion Sonic. So okay. All right, Gareth wants everyone to remember to render the like button. All right. All right, Tim K just says, got in Arteria Keylab 49, the script instructions from the Steinberg forums are incomplete, pointing to a non-existent drop-down options, no way to finish configuration, any easy way to back out, reset MIDI. So let's say I'll just add a MIDI remote. Let me just plug it in here in my office. So I'm not sure if that has like an official script or if it was just a script that was kind of user generated. But if we come over here to, let's say, our settings, so let's say I want to come over here to this controller, you could go into scripts. So again, just kind of, if you just select, if you go to the Open MIDI Remote Manager, you could select the one that you're trying to get rid of, click on the scripts tab. You can disable it or simply delete the script if you wanted to start new. So again, under the MIDI remote tab, click here to the Open MIDI Remote Manager, select the particular device, probably the Arteria in your case, and at this point go to the scripts tab, and then you could delete or just simply choose to disable the script. Let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Brian Sawyer Sr. says, hi Greg, what's the shortcut to move the octave of notes? All right, so let's say we're in our MIDI editor here. And let me just, and I wanted to move these notes up or down an octave. If you hold down Shift, so if we wanted to go chromatically, we could use the up and down arrow keys. If we wanted to go by octave, hold down the Shift and the down arrow to go down an octave, or Shift plus the up arrow key to navigate up arrow with Shift, down arrow with Shift, and then that would move it in intervals of an octave. So Shift plus the down arrow to go down an octave, Shift plus the up arrow to go up an octave. All right, so we see from InDrop, hi Greg, is it possible to save templates or snapshots with less tools and different layout preferences for easy laptop screen view that could be easily switched back to desktop with more features? So I'm not sure with less tools. I mean, you could choose to have, different, if you, let's say your laptop had a smaller screen, like you got a MacBook Air which has kind of a small screen resolution, that, you might choose to, you could configure Cubase differently, and these could be kind of for the particular, there's, some functions that will be stored within a project and some that are stored kind of natively within Cubase. So if you didn't need to see your transport at the bottom, you could come over here and say, okay, I don't need the transport bar or the lower zone when I'm working on my laptop. And this would, and those settings would stick to your laptop if you take it to your desktop where you have a larger screen resolution. At that point, you could say, okay, I want to see this. I want to see everything in, everything that's available because I have a bigger screen resolution. So a lot of those types of, I don't need to see the right zone or the channel settings, but I want to see the channel settings, but not the kind of the we'll call it the traditional inspector. So these types of changes are kind of preserved on the computer and not transferred with projects. So if I wanted to work, this way on my desktop and not see the lower zone or any of the inspectors or the control, the right-hand zone on my laptop, I could set that up and work. So, but it's not necessarily tools. But, again, these we could pick and choose just by right-clicking what functions are available and visible, and those won't be transferred over with the project. But if you have different configurations for a laptop and desktop, they would each still function kind of independently for most of those types of things. All right. See, David M says, hi Greg, just tried to time stretch a different file and everything worked okay. Must have been a bad WAV file. It's because you watch 4 live streams that you have this karmic presence so that when you ask a question, it'll be resolved for you. All right, so we see a question from Jay from Secret Studios. Greg, is there a way to take multiple MIDI tracks and combine them into one compound MIDI piece like a reverse of Dissolve? Okay, so let's say if I come here, I'll just do Dissolve and we'll show you how to do the opposite. So. Okay, so let's say if I come here and I have this, I'm going to dissolve this so people, and we're going to separate all of the pitches. Just do something with some more. I'll use that one. Some more parts. Okay, so we go to MIDI, dissolve parts, and when we separate by pitches, we can come over, and now each of these will be the separate pitches. So let's come over here, and I'm just going to hit the letter P, and let's see if we do. So I just selected all of those particular events, and now we could also just kind of, I hit the letter P to set the left and right locators and went to MIDI, and then I chose merge MIDI in loop. So let me just do that again. So select those, and I just choose merged MIDI in loop, and we hit OK, and now everything is merged. Also, if you have just like one or two parts, if you copy like this event on top where we have these kind of all layered, and I'll hold down my control key so we don't accidentally move any of these in time. So if you wanted to manually do this as well, and you didn't want to interrupt your left and right locators, if we grab the glue gun and hold down the Alt key, I believe, Alt or Option key, that now these will all be merged. But again, just come over here, select those particular events, hit the letter P to set the left and right locators, and go to MIDI, merge MIDI in loop. And that's kind of the opposite function that we see from the dissolve part. So let me know if that works for you, Jay. All right, so we see from Ariana Addy, just says, thank you, Greg. So yeah, let me know if you get that sorted out. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, says, can you demonstrate time stretching in combination with a video synchronization? All right. Okay, so let's say if I have my video here. All right, so let's say we're starting. All right, I'll just drop an audio. Okay, so let's say we have this going on. All right, and let's say I need this file to end right here. Like right as we transition into this scene. So one of the things you could do is if you just say sizing applies time stretch, I could just move that to the cursor, and now that particular file is time stretched. And then we just, here, we had the other file playing, so, and that file will end right at when that scene transition comes up. So you could just simply, you know, as we move your cursor here, we could just simply at this point. Now, also, if we have, if we wanted to do like more rhythmic, to hit, you know, different cues as well, you know, so one of the things we could do is, if we go to your transport, we could say video files editing mode on and off. So now as I move an audio file, the video will update frame by frame. Also, let's say if I'm here and let's go to our free warp. So I will come to my free warp, and let's say as we zoom in, I want to place a warp marker here and here, that as we move the warp marker, we could just say, okay, I want this event to occur, like that sound event to just immediately occur. So we could just kind of stretch the audio to be lined up with very specific cues if you have very kind of short. So let's say if I have like an impact, you know, and I only want, you know, my impact to be like right at the end of this transition, we could just move stuff like that. And then again, you could just say, okay, as we get to different scenes, I want that impact to go to right at that point. And we can say, let's just time stretch it. And as we do the time stretching, we can just have that automatically align. So, but make sure, Daniela, that you have the video files time stretchment, and then anytime that you're moving an event or doing edits, you can see the video update frame by frame. Okay. All right, so we see Val, and just saying I'm trying to create an instrument for HALion Sonic. I've done normal VST3 samplers and synths, but not inside of HALion, still figuring that out. Yeah, I mean, there's some kind of development tools. I know one that a lot of people that are just kind of starting off may use, kind of like a Juice framework. I think Juice is kind of a kind of an environment for creating VST3 plugins. But, you know, it's really, you know, for instruments, like once you kind of get into HALion, and it could be, you know, pretty involved because, you know, you're doing something pretty technical. But let's say if you go to HALion 7.1, you could kind of just start off with, you know, you're making, here we'll start off with our default screen set, but, you know, you'll have, you know, different screen sets for, you know, where you're able to kind of just start off so like, you know, as we are, you know, so if you want to do a more advanced screen set, but once you get into you know, making your own instruments, there's, you know, an entirely you know, just, you know, a whole set of tools just to do that directly inside of HALion 7. So and if you check out a lot of the virtual instruments that are, you know, actually created, you know, just to give you an idea, like, you know, if we look at Chris St. Aubyn's Simple, it's a wonderful instrument. know, so all the design elements that we see here are all, you know, these are all just instruments that were built from within the HALion environment. So, you know, check that out as well. So there's all sorts of great stuff that you could do. So even if you're just, you know, starting off, you could, you know, create your own instruments and say we have this, and now you want to start, you know, building all the graphics elements of it as well. So all right, wonderful to see Best Korean Jesus on. Thanks for joining us this Friday from San Diego. All right. So a question, please explain about live setup setting for solo, vocal, and guitar. So let's say if we were doing a live setup, so if we'll come over here, let's say just a new project. All right, so we can add a live, we'll just say, okay, let's, okay, about live setup, setting for solo, vocal, guitar. So, you know, if you're performing live or recording live, so let's say, okay, we want this to be guitar, and I'm just hit the tab key so we can name the tracks. So if at this point, what I would do is, like, let's say we have the guitar on microphone 1, the vocal on microphone 2. So I'm going to go to my inputs. We can see that we have currently a stereo in. So if I wanted to simplify things, I could add a mono input, and we want to add 2 mono ins. So we could do this, and we could label these. We'll call it guitar and vocal. And what I want to do now at this point is to set my input. So we can say this is coming from my guitar input, or maybe we have a microphone. And let's say our vocal is going to go from, you know, our vocal input. We could place these into record. Now you may want to have some effects on, you know, so if you wanted to add like a courtesy reverb, we could now come over and let's add an effects channel track. Let's make, and sometimes using kind of a small footprint reverb can have lower latency. So even if you go to like RoomWorks SE, and now we could just come over here to the sends. We'll say, okay, I want this reverb on the guitar a little bit, and maybe I want more reverb on the vocal. And you could just kind of, and then to record, you could just simply enable record on the tracks. And if you want to monitor the recording, enable monitor right there. And then you could save that as a template if you wanted to. So if you need to do that all the time to kind of start off like a songwriting session, you could then come over here and go to File and Save as Template. And then you could always have everything kind of configured when you open up that particular template. So let me know if that's helpful for you. It's from Nitin Vishnu Koot. All right, so we see Bratman Studio on. Says, hey, Greg, Rick here. It's not yet noon here on the West Coast. I was wondering what the Retrologue synth was based on, ARP Moog, etc. What's the difference between Retrologue 1 and Retrologue 2 versions? Why purchase? So Retrologue isn't really necessarily based on other like hardware implementation, so you could have it mimic it. But a lot of the other, when we open up Retrologue, we'll come over here. So let's go to an instrument track and let's open Retrologue. So when we see Retrologue, what's kind of great about Retrologue, so, obviously it can mimic a lot of classic Moog and, ARP synthesizers, because you could have multiple oscillators, but, each of the oscillators here, we could have it be a multi-oscillator, cross-sync, we're doing crossover. It has its own, noise generator, a sub-oscillator. We can have an audio input. So, while it can choose to, we have our filters and our envelopes and our modulation matrix like you see in a lot of classic synths, but it's not necessarily trying to emulate, a particular classic synthesizer, because it doesn't want to necessarily kind of limit the functionality. And I think Retrologue was actually the first instrument where someone actually designed a hardware instrument based on Retrologue. So it was released in, I think it was at a Frankfurt show a number of years ago. So I think it was the first software synth that someone made a hardware version of, which is kind of interesting twist on things. And the difference between Retrologue 1 and Retrologue 2. So Retrologue 1 had this basic synthesizer and modulation. So Retrologue 2 kind of enhanced the modulation matrix and added the built-in arpeggiator as well as effects. So this way we don't have to necessarily route to plugins or external processing. We can have all the external processing as well as a number of great different arpeggios and arpeggiations that are included. But, so I think that you can mimic just about any classic synth with Retrologue, but it's not going to be limited to the design limitations of classic synthesizers. So let me know if that makes sense for you. And thanks for being on today. All right, we have a question from inactive user. It says, thanks, Greg. Is there a way to fast time stretch a clip audio event like selection G time stretch mode and just drag it longer or shorter? So when we go to our object selection mode, the object selection mode will actually go to 3 different modes. So we have kind of a normal sizing. So take something obnoxious like that. So let's say we listen to it and we do normal sizing on an event that we could kind of crop the end or crop the beginning of the event. We also have a secondary mode where you can say sizing moves contents. So I want the beginning of that file to start like in the middle of measure 2. And then the end, then so we could have that clip start, or we could say the ending needs to be in the middle of measure 2, and the start of the clip will go anywhere to match. Now the third mode that we have with this sizing is sizing applies time stretch. So you can say, oh, I need this to fit into 10 seconds of time. I could just come right over here, and now what was playing, if we undo, redo. So just coming right over here, put it into your sizing applies time stretch, and if you hit the 1 key on your QWERTY keyboard, that will cycle between these different modes. You could also set a dedicated key command for that, but if you want it to play slower, just drag it out, and now, or you want to play faster. So once you're in that mode, you can now just say, oh, I need it to fit into that amount of space. And so just go to the sizing applies time stretch mode, and then I think that will be a great way of doing that for you. So Memento says he doesn't think we're getting ice cream today. He hasn't seen Michael Teams on yet. Maybe he'll be joining a little later. All right, great to see Randy Leon from Texas. All right, so wonderful to see Rob Hill on. Rob used to work together way back when. He was Steinberg. He was one of the first Nuendo product specialists. Wonderful to see you on, and I'm doing really well, Rob. Hope you're doing great as well. So wonderful to see you on. All right, and we see Michael Teams has joined from Weatherford, Texas. Thanks for joining. Everyone was missing your ice cream, apparently. So. See, Best Cream Jesus had a question last night, but forgot to write it down. All right, maybe it'll come back. Yeah, if only we had computers to take notes of stuff. All right, so we see a question directed to Jazz Dude from Val's. Do I need the full version of how? I think it's, do I need a full version of it? So if you want to make your own instruments, you would need the full HALion version to do that. And that will give you kind of the VSTI authoring solutions. Okay, inactive user asks, how can I open my buffer size to change it fast? Because when I'm recording, I use 128 buffer size, but when I'm mixing, I use 1024. So again, you can just kind of pop over to your studio setup. Sometimes your audio interface may have like a little control panel to adjust the buffer size. A lot of times you can just, once you go to your audio interface, go to the control panel and adjust the buffer size there. So a lot of audio interfaces may have like a little, little applet where you could change the buffer size, but otherwise you'd just have to go directly into the, so again, just come over to studio setup, and then go to the control panel for your audio interface and adjust the buffers there. And then once we do that, often we may leave kind of the Cubase environment to make the adjustment in the audio interface control panel. And then once we close that out, then Cubase will update with new buffer size. Okay, my chat field jumped on me. Let me just find my spot. All right, so we see from Da Vinci Girl, says, okay, thank you, because I compose regularly after the cut. The video is done. No changes to the video anymore. But if the film director of the team there decided to put in 2 scenes, then no one book an orchestra in studio again. Most are involved in film, 3 to 4 audio studios. So yeah, there's always, it's kind of the running joke amongst film composers, picture lock, what they call it. It's always going to be the final edit, and then they'll compose everything, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we took out 2 seconds here, we added a scene here, we put a little pause here, and that has big implications. So yeah, I would say that the final picture lock is a kind of a movable target. So happens to even Hans Zimmer. He's like, they really try hard, but it's kind of, I often run into it. So all right, we see Nick is happy getting ice cream from Michael Teams in Texas. comments. All right, so we see Michael Teams says Cubase says used all what I learned on Tuesday. Woohoo! You've created a monster. All right, well, just looking forward to having more tracks to play bass on. So it's great, and thanks for letting me know, Michael. And Michael shares his tip of he always has a tablet, numerous pens and pencils during the professor's class. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. Thanks for joining us today. And we see Michael Teams has quickly granted Tiago 1 gallon of nougat ice cream. Very generous. All right, great to see Peter Bata from Montreal. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see all right, so Scott Jordan asks, says, is there a way to take a VST instrument preset in HALion Sonic Sound and convert it to an audio file that could be used in HALion 7 for wavetable synthesis or synth zone processing? All right, so let's say I want to take, let's find a quick Wavelab 7. Let me clear my throat. All right, so let me just... All right, so I'll just kind of take a preset from Extreme here. So I'll do kind of a two-step approach to this. So I'm just going to draw in a note here. Okay, now one of the cool things that we could do is let's take this all right, so we'll try this approach. So I'm going to take from directly from just the MIDI note that's drawn in. We'll go to our sampler control. I'll drag this down, and now we've created a sampler track of that sound. And then if we see these 3 arrows here, we can now transfer to HALion. And let's see if we could. So now it's that sound is in HALion. And let's see if we need to add a zone. So let's say we want to add a wavetable zone. Okay, so let's... All right, so let's see if we can... Guess we could also just render in place. Let me just try this method. So I'll just say we'll take one note. All right, we'll add another emergent instance of HALion. All right, so now if you wanted to go to like wavetable synth, you know, again, once we come here, we'll say, okay, let's get to a wavetable synth, and we could just kind of drop let me just see if it was wavetable synth that you wanted. All right, so let me just jump back to all right, let's see if we so I know if we go to like Anima, that we could, so let me just I think we could just, I thought we could just drag and create our own wavetable. Let me see if I'm, but I know if we do, we just, like a lot of this, we can do a, we're doing like a granular. That, you know, you can kind of drag and drop your samples in, but kind of to start off, you know, is easily just to kind of take the original file here, drag it to the sampler track, and then you could export it to HALion for further processing. So if now, let's come over. And I think if we just maybe add a zone, and now we could kind of, you know, combine so even just kind of dropping the sample there, but now you could combine and say, okay, you know, what oscillator do you want? So all sorts of stuff that you could do with that, combining those different elements. All right, so we see Peter just saying, looks like remnants of Hurricane Debbie decided to visit Montreal. So we had it here this morning with tornado warnings, kind of waking up everyone at 7 a.m. So we didn't have any tornadoes, fortunately. So But yeah, it seemed to be a fast-moving storm. All right, so we see Randy Lee is going to be back in a bit. So we see from Tiago, feature request to use Project Logical Editor to event description, to file name and multiple events. All right, it says I received a project with audios named as audio 01, 02, etc. I wanted to rename all. Let's see, there's, and he says his cell phone is trying to correct him to write in Portuguese. But let me know, you know, if you want to get rid of the names, the numbers, but sometimes, if you say you want to rename audio 1 to, kick drum or lead vocal, maybe if you could, Tiago, let me know exactly what you want to do, or if you want it like a batch process where audio 01 is always renamed to this, but that may not be applicable depending on the project. So maybe Tiago, if you give a little more information on renaming, we can see if we could help out. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see Jazzy Lamel on, just saying, Greg, I hope you had a great vacation. So it was nice, but always most, as most vacations, too short. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, the time warp stretching edits are for me the most stressful jobs. Film directors decide, orchestrator sends. Did a composer, he composed, sends to his assistants. You have to create exact the sound. So yeah, I mean, often you try to get everything locked in, obviously before, the orchestra is in the studio, and try to get all those decisions made. So, and that's why using environments like Cubase is really good, because you can make changes and not spend the entire budget for the orchestra sitting there waiting for you to get it sorted out. All right, so we see from Jazzy Lamel, says, hey Greg, can you give me some tips on how to record my effects on different tracks, like the reverb on one track, delay effect on a different track, etc. So if you want to record with effects on it, I'll just do a new project here. So a lot of times effects aren't necessarily recorded, but are kind of processed. Okay, so let's say if we have these particular effects, so we have this track. All right, let me just, now if we want to hear the effects in real time, we could just open up an insert effect. So let's say I want this to go through like a flanger. So we'll come over here to modulation and say, okay, let's go to flanger. So we hear the flanger in real time. If we wanted to add, let's say, a delay, we could add an effects channel track to the selected track. So let's say I want a mono delay. And let's make it like an 8th note delay. So, but these aren't actually kind of embedded into the tracks. So they're playing in real time. A lot of effects are playing in real time. So we could have kind of the flanger. So we could do that, but if we wanted to actually, if you want to do it on the recording and kind of physically write the effects in, what you would need to do is when you go into your mix console, you have these red faders, and these red faders are our inputs, which are defined if you go to the studio menu to audio connections, or you could hit F4. So we have our inputs, and if we open up our inputs, we could apply EQ and different plugins here. So if we wanted to record and put the effects on the recording, but you know, where it's permanently kind of baked in, permanently cooked into the track, you would just put it on an input channel. If you wanted to be processed in real time afterwards, you could run it as an insert or a send effect. And then if you wanted to take those inserts and send effects and embed it into, you know, the audio files once you got everything dialed in, because if you record with the effects, you can't undo that. It's kind of permanently, it's like burning the steak. Can't unburn the steak. But if we come over and do let's say a render in place. So I'll do a render place, and we'll say let's include the signal path. Now I could take that file, and this file is dry, that's being processed through effects. This file has no effects in real-time processing, but they've been embedded or burned into the file here, like so. So, but if you wanted to have the effects in the recording, you could do that. Now you can also record and monitor with the effects in real time, unless you go to your studio setup and your audio interface is set up for direct monitoring. So if you think you should be hearing the effects during tracking and you're not, make sure that you don't have direct monitoring enabled for your audio interface. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see, it says, okay, so we see further clarification from Tiago. It says, I want to rename file name Audio 0 and Audio 02 to file name Music Tiago 0 and Music Tiago 02, not just the description. This can be done in Project Logical Editor, but the file name I think is not. So I think Innuendo has this functionality. So it could be a Innuendo specific feature. Let me just take a quick look. But I don't think it's in Cubase. Okay. Okay, so let's come over here. So we see Audio 01, Audio 02, Audio 03. All right. So I think Innuendo, and if we go to our pool window, that there's a rename advanced rename. Okay, so let's say original name. All right. So see if there's like a let me just see if there's a rename. Okay, I'm just gonna okay, so let's see if we see if I have any. But I'm not sure if the files. Let's see if we. There's a way to rename, but it's not a function in Cubase. But I think you could accomplish it. Okay, let's take. I'll just try one more quick time. I'll just try. Yeah, but I think you might be able to kind of do something like that in the window, but it's not in Cubase. You might have to manually do it. But I'll pass it along. All right. All right, you see David M has to take off. We see, all right. All right, so we see, all right. Dismiss my Ring doorbell, sorry. Yeah, so just seeing kind of DaVinci Girl just says, you know, how expensive it is for all this for 2 to 3 hours, and it's very stressful and different studios. So yeah, most of the film composers I know, by the time they have the musicians in the studio, everything is pretty locked in. But, you know, before the musicians are in the studio. But I can imagine there will be times when it's not. So, because usually once they do it, it's so expensive that they won't make that mistake again. All right, great to see Troca on. All right, so we see Tiago with a feature request. So I'd like to be able to quantize vocal pitch from a MIDI file. I have a MIDI file. I have MIDI from a score. I would like to align multiple vocals to the MIDI file. I'm currently doing this manually in VariAudio. So, yeah, I mean, I understand that it kind of looks the same way, but, you know, dealing with all of the pitch segments, you know, the segmentation could be different than the MIDI file. You know, maybe I'll definitely kind of pass on the feature request for you. All right, I know we had some more questions that were sent in. Let me get to those. I have to wrap up a little early today. I have a gig I'm doing tonight, so I want to make sure I'm not late for sound check. So I'm going to wrap up in about 27 minutes. And again, we won't be having a live stream on Tuesday, but we will a week from today. Okay, so we have a question on Pro 13. When I take the small 8 indicating stereo to make a track mono, the picture on the timeline does not change. I've watched tutorials about the new feature, and their track pictures also do not change. I like being able to glance at the track itself and know immediately, without looking at the much smaller indicators to the left, of whether the track is stereo or mono. Is there a way to update the appearance when I switch from one to the other? So let's take a look. Okay, so I think what we're looking at here is this indication where we see that it's mono or stereo. So it looks like that is changing kind of as expected for me. And I think that this is the icon that was referenced. And we see one circle that's indicating that's mono. If I click again, we can see 2 circles indicating that it's stereo. So I think, you know, if that's the icons that you're referring to, that, you know, to me that's pretty clear which is which. And I'm trying to see if there's other indications or icons indicating stereo or mono. I think that's the main primary indicator, but when I click there, it's automatically changing between mono and stereo. So, but let me know if I'm clicking somewhere differently than you are. All right, and I think we got to some of the art questions that were asked within the live stream. Let me just go through and make sure I didn't miss any. All right, so I think we got all of those questions. Let's jump back to our live chat. All right, so we see Tiago says, Greg, thanks for help. Nuendo can do the job of renaming the files. You know, I guess you could always do a Nuendo trial version in a pinch. So if you had like hundreds of files or thousands of files to work with. All right, seeing some discussion of weather changes for different people in different parts of the country. See, Peter is just saying, Greg, wrap up early. How dare you? So yeah, I'm trying not to be the guy that's late for sound check, making everyone else stressed out. But yeah, gig tonight. So again, the index may not show up till tomorrow morning or late tonight, depending what time I get back from my performance. But just a heads up with that. Okay, so you see Val says, Greg, I did write you an email about changing my price to HALion 7. Maybe it's possible. So yeah, send me another email, Val, just to make sure. And then I don't think any of the licenses have been activated yet till Monday. So let me know, and I'd be happy to see if we get your HALion 7 so you can start making instruments. Yeah, so you can make your own HALion instruments and make a living. So like when you look at, you know, it's like some of the instruments that you look at, I think I have some. So let's say we get to our HALion 7, you know, some of the instruments that you actually see will, you know, are a lot of them are kind of, you know, made by users. Just seeing if I have. So pretty much all of these instruments, I'm just seeing if I have like some of Danny Lux's, who's like an amazing TV composer, but he has his whole, you know, started a whole company making virtual instruments for HALion. He got so into it. All right, see, kind words from Peter. Just tell me enjoy the gig and break a leg. So hopefully I won't break a leg and fall off the stage. No. But let's see if there's any other questions that sneak in. You see, Peter is just saying, not literally, of course. I didn't really take it literally, so. All right, I'll just wait another minute or so, see if there's more questions. We see Jazz Dude posting trial versions of HALion. And all right, so Val said, should I write an additional mail to the one I sent today? So yes, I'll take a quick look, see if you see Peter just asking if anyone's taking advantage of the new drum bundle offer. Okay, yeah, so I got your email today. Let me just read through Val. Yeah, so I got your email, so that'd be fine, Val. You don't have to resend another email from today. So I guess it came during the live stream. So. Okay, so we see Jazzy Lamel says, hey Greg, sorry for the confusion, but what I meant was when you have a vocal track with reverb and delay on it, I want to be able to have the vocal dry on one track and the effect sends recorded. Okay. Okay, so it's okay, so let's say if I'm here, let's So we go to our vocal.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. It was 7th grade in the school parking lot.
All right, and we're just going to revert this because I did some destroying of it.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot.
All right.
Waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
So let's say we have our reverb here.
My way.
So let's add an audio track, and let's set the effects. Let's say the verb as our input.
My breath while you called me to. Well, even now I'm so in love with you, just like a long, long time ago. Oh, I remember the day that.
So you could just record the reverb. Another thing that you could do is just, if you wanted to, if you go over here to export and we go to export audio mixdown, I could say let's just export the verb and we'll create an audio track, and I'll say we just set the left and right locators. So go to export audio mixdown. We'll just say, okay, let's take multiple. I want the verb and my delay. So I could just choose to export audio mixdown. Just get this exported here. And now we go to the bottom, we could have each of the effects rendered. So now each of the different effects can be rendered directly into the project as well. Okay. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl says that I do not see a reason for next year's upgrade to Pro version. The era implementations in VST change to 3 keep me in distance. So I'm not sure, I know we've discussed, but there really isn't a change in VST2 or VST3 implementations in Cubase. So, and if you don't have ARA, you don't have to, you don't have to use ARA. So I'm still confused. Like if you think VST3 is not supported, but VST2 is not supported, VST2 plugins are still working in Cubase on Windows. I know you're running Windows 7 for your machine. So. All right, so we see John Costigan says, have a fun gig, Greg. Just remember EADG. So it's a rock gig. So of course it's tuned down to E flat, A flat, D flat, and F sharp. So all drop tuned. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. You got 2 projects out the door today. His work at Grand Chapel Studios. Thanks for joining us. All right, see if there's any more questions that kind of sneak in. I think I have one question at the bottom here that's kind of obscured in my web browser. I'm getting one of my tablets repaired, so I'm using a different device to monitor. See, Michael Pierce says he still needs a lesson in drop tuning. So with many rock bands, they play in E flat. They drop tune everything down a half step so that the guitars can play in the key of E and the singer can sing in the key of E flat. It just really messes you up if you have perfect pitch, though. Okay, so you see Michael Graybills has been wanting to move away from Contact. Started using it when Giga got axed by Tascam, and how you can feel safer long term. So kind of feeling similar vibes with NI these days. All right. All right, so we see DaVinci Girl. Daniela just says for my Fairlight and VST2 and 3 and AU. So, yeah, so I don't think if you have a Windows 7 machine, you're not going to run any AU plugins, but, you know, VST2, it still works. So you're not going to get any new functionality in VST2. So. So we see a comment from Michael Pierce says, like scoring for brass. So it's not necessarily like a orchestral transposition where they're kind of playing the notes, but basically it's just an easy way, you know, singers will request drop tuning so that they don't have to sing as high, but the guitar players can still use the same open strings for guitar-friendly keys. All right, let's see if there's any other questions that sneak in. Give it another minute. If not, we'll wrap up just a little early. Okay, so it looks like we are out of questions. So again, we will have our next live stream on Friday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next Friday. Goodbye.